Something we often see whenever Hollywood decides to adapt a book into a movie or TV show is that the actors cast to play certain characters don't look at all like they were described in the book. Sometimes it can be the actor looking older or younger than they should, or having a different hair color. But these types of small changes we can all brush off really easily. What I'm more interested in and what I'm going to talk about is adaptational attractiveness. This refers specifically to when a book character that is described as being anything from plain or overweight to downright ugly is played by a conventionally attractive actor. We see this happen all the time. For example, in the 1847 novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Rochester is described as being very ugly. He has a dark, craggy face with stern features and a heavy brow. He is also pigeon-chested and has a shaggy mane of black hair. Yet in the 1983 miniseries, 2006 miniseries, and 2011 film, Rochester is played by Timothy Dalton, Toby Stephens, and Michael Fassbender, all of whom are far from ugly. Or in the 1998 novel Hold, the protagonist Stanley is described multiple times as being overweight, but in the 2003 film, this same character is played by Shia LaBeouf, who is far from that. Of course, it's no mystery as to why this is a trend with adaptations. Studios are investing millions into a movie, so they want to get as many people as they can into theater seats so that they can make a big profit. In order to do that, they need to make the movie appealing to as many people as possible, and one of the simplest and easiest ways of doing that is to cast famous, attractive actors. Still, that doesn't stop fans of the books, including myself in numerous cases, from being disappointed or irritated at seeing book characters we know so well manifest on screen in a completely different body to one we had imagined. The question is this just another case of book readers being nitpicky at any and all changes that deviate from the book? Or does adaptational attractiveness have real significant consequences in building a character and telling the story the way it should be told? Because if it doesn't, maybe it's not such a big deal. Real quickly, I'll touch on what I find to be one of the funniest cases of this, at least funny to me, and it happened this year with Ready Player One. Of course, there's Wade Watts, who is described as being nerdy and overweight in the book, only losing weight later on in the novel, but it isn't like that in the movie. However, the one that really stood out to me was Samantha Cook, aka Artemis. A huge point to the romantic subplot is that Wade keeps being rejected by her because of her insecurities, and she is convinced that he would not love her in real life. She says, "Trust me, if I ever let you see me in person, you would be repulsed." The physical attributes she has that she finds so repulsive is a port wine stain that covers half of her face. And while not outright described as fat or chubby, she is referred to as Rubenesque. This subplot of her constantly having to reject Wade, and that the reason for the rejection is solely down to her being so insecure with how she looks, rather than her having her own thing going on, or just genuinely not being interested, is probably my least favorite part of the book. But for as flawed as this subplot is in the book, I think it's handled even worse in the movie. I did enjoy Ready Player One, and this isn't something that I think makes or breaks the movie. I went to see it exclusively for stunning action sequences, and in that regard, it delivered. Nevertheless, the reason I think this subplot is handled worse in the movie is entirely down to adaptational attractiveness. You see, in the movie, actress Olivia Cooke was cast as Artemis. She is, of course, good-looking, non-Rubenesque, and while they did kind of keep the port wine aspect of the character's appearance, really all it is just a slight faint birthmark on the corner of her face. It is so insubstantial, yet the whole subplot stays exactly the same, and we're supposed to believe that this insecurity is so deep that she truly believes that no boy could ever find her attractive. And even worse is Wade still gets his "I love you for you" type of scene, where he lets her know that he isn't disappointed.
I'm not disappointed.
As if we're supposed to find it endearing that he wasn't completely put off by a little mild discoloration on a beautiful woman's face. So here we have two cases of adaptational attractiveness. One that I think has little to no effect on storytelling, and another that does. I can't think of ways in which Wade not being fat in the movie has made a difference. I guess you can make an argument that him being overweight in the books shows one of the negative aspects of spending all your waking hours in the Oasis. But really, his weight and weight loss is not a vital part of this character and his story. For Artemis though, as explained, you can see how it has affected storytelling. Unlike Wade, a huge chunk of a storyline is dedicated to appearance, so what they should have done is either change that up by giving the character her own reasoning for rejecting Wade, one that has nothing to do with her insecurities about her appearance, or at the very least fully commit and don't tone down the aspect of her appearance that she's so insecure about. Don't tone it down to the point where it looks like just an oddly positioned bad sunburn. They could have easily made what is supposed to be a port wine stain look more prominent like the vast majority of them do in real life. Had they done that, maybe then the subplot would come across as less of a joke. Because it's hard to take that storyline or character seriously when you can't relate to someone who looks really good think that they're hideous. And that brings me to my biggest issue with adaptational attractiveness. I'll concede that the vast majority of times we see this happen, you can't point out ways in which it's completely changed the story. That's because, unless the plot of the story is something similar to that of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Elephant Man, or Beauty and the Beast, we don't see very many stories that completely hinge on a character not being attractive. But there is one nearly universal way it does impact character, and that's relatability. Let's go to arguably one of the most famous and beloved fictional characters in the world, who also happens to be the one that inspired this video, Hermione Granger. In the books, Hermione is described as having lots of bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth. It's important to note that in the book she's never actually described as ugly, and I've never pictured her that way when reading them. That being said, Emma Watson is obviously significantly better looking than what we know Hermione is supposed to look like in the books.
To be honest, you and Rupert and Emma are all too good looking, frankly. You are. You know, the characters were geeky and you...
Did you know that was going to happen? Did you sort of think they might...
I'm not an idiot.
I also want to say that Emma Watson did an incredible job playing Hermione, and I really can't and don't want to imagine anyone else in that role. And that applies to everyone in the series, maybe with the exception of Gilderoy Lockhart, who, funnily enough, I think isn't anywhere near as good looking as described in the books, especially considering he's supposed to be in his 20s, not 40s. But that's the opposite of what we're talking about, so back to Hermione.
He said to me, I've only ever acted in school drama plays before, and God, oh my God, I'm so nervous, I can't believe I got the part. And then she spoke for like 60 seconds at least without drawing breath, and I just said, Emma, you're perfect. And then when I met her and she was this very beautiful... Yeah. Which she still is, of course, a beautiful girl, I just kind of had to go, okay, it's film, deal with it. I'm going to still see my gawky, geeky, ugly duckling Hermione in my mind, but...
Do you think...
We've established that I think Emma Watson is still great in the role, and J.K. Rowling herself says that despite her being too good looking, she thinks Emma is a great actress and similar to Hermione in a lot of other ways, so it didn't really matter to her. However, not all fans of the book feel this way, as I've seen many people online and in real life that are bothered by this case of adaptational attractiveness. So I've always questioned if it mattered. Does the lack of buck teeth, bushy hair, and overall outward geekiness that the character should possess have an effect on her and the movies? As for specific examples within the story where this is the case, right away I think of the Yule Ball. If you're unfamiliar, this is a chapter from the 4th book and scene from the movie Goblet of Fire, where Hermione, who is attending a ball at the school, gets a sort of Cinderella moment, or a Mia from the Princess Diaries moment. It's something we've seen a million times. Girl takes off her glasses, straightens her hair, and suddenly, oh my god, what a transformation, she's turning heads. I'm not a big fan of that trope. I think it's something we've seen too many times. But in this instance, in the book at least, it actually makes for what I think is one of the best moments of the series. Aside from being very entertaining, it's because of everything it does for character development. For Hermione, this is a moment where we get to see a side of her that we don't otherwise get to see.
It was quite a big deal for me that I had written a strong female character who was primarily about brain, and that she chose to become a little more groomed and glamorous as us geeks do at a certain point in our lives. But
there's a vulnerability to knowing that you're someone who the whole school views in one particular way, and taking the effort to change that, even if just for a school dance, saying, hey, there's more to me that you aren't seeing, I think is a really sweet and relatable moment for the character. But translating this onto screen was a bit of a mess, mainly because Hermione's transformation wasn't much of a transformation at all.
In the 4th film, where she comes downstairs and there is supposed to have been this transformation.
Well, exactly.
Because we're all looking going, well, she was already a beautiful girl.
Yeah, big deal. Now she's a beautiful girl in a beautiful dress.
In the books, Harry literally doesn't recognize her. He thinks she's someone else. That's how big of a transformation it was. So just on a basic level, the effect of seeing a character completely transform before our eyes is taken away. But digging a little deeper than that, I think the bigger problem is it does away with, or at least dampens, the ways in which this moment has added to character. For example, with Victor Crumb. One of the reasons I love this chapter so much is because it did so much for Crumb as a character and made him a million times more interesting and likable than I thought he was. Hermione sees beyond the facade of his celebrity, and he sees her for more than just a bushy-haired bookworm long before everyone else does. Back when she barely even registered as a girl to her closest friends. It's not the same in the movie, because in the movie, Crumb is simply asking a pretty girl to be his date. There's a part in the book where Harry and Ron talk about needing dates to the Yule Ball.
We should get a move on, Ask someone. He's right. We don't want to end up with a pair of trolls. Hermione let out a splutter of indignation. A pair of what? Excuse me? Well, said Ron, shrugging. I'd rather go alone than with Eloise Midgin, say. Her acne's loads better lately, and she's really nice. Her nose is off-centre, said Ron.
Just imagine how it feels for book Hermione, knowing she also has the physical flaws just like the girls Ron is comparing to trolls. That's why it's so great that someone came along who actually values her intelligence, someone who waited at the library for her on numerous occasions, trying to build up the courage to ask her to the ball. And he saw the beauty in her long before she got glammed up. But in the movie, because Emma Watson could easily be the most attractive girl at Hogwarts, it comes across in a completely different way. Krum doesn't get this character development because, again, he is just a handsome guy asking a good looking girl to the ball. And for Hermione, she's just a pretty girl that got asked to the ball, not a big deal. There's no more layers to it beyond that. So there's one way you can see this case of adaptational attractiveness impacting the story and character. However, the Yule Ball aside, I can't really find any other direct consequences of them not giving Emma Watson fake teeth, or them neglecting to keep her hair big and bushy beyond the second film. And considering that in 8 movies, that's 19 hours and 39 minutes worth of film, and yet there's only one glaring example I can think of, you can make the argument that adaptational attractiveness doesn't really matter in this instance. And I'm inclined to agree. But like I said earlier, there's one universal way it does have an effect, and that's with character relatability. It's not a scene that you can pinpoint, and it isn't something that I can say impacts all audience members that watch the movie. But when you take away the physical flaws or imperfections that a character possesses, you're taking away an aspect to that character that very many people related to. And the thing that I found with cases of adaptational attractiveness is that it's very commonly accompanied by the same thing being done to the character's personality. By that I mean, when they're willing to take away a character's physical imperfections, they are likely to do the same with the flaws of a character's personality and actions. Appearance aside, the way Hermione is written in the movies is quite different to the books, and this is probably a result of her being the screenwriter's favorite character.
I remember very specifically leaning over to you and saying, I think I need to tell you that Harry's not my favorite character.
Which was fine. And then you said?
Hermione. And it was true because Hermione was the character that, and it stayed throughout.
I can make a whole other video breaking down in detail what my problems are with how she's written in the movies, but in summary, the problem is, she's perfect. She's smart, strong, fearless, and once you add Emma Watson into the mix, she's gorgeous too. Of course, book Hermione has these strengths as well, but the difference is, they are often balanced out by her flaws. While smart, she isn't always capable of applying that to every situation.
Devil's snare, devil's snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It lights the dark and the damp. So light a fire, Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione, said Harry, as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood. Honestly.
She panics, and it takes Ron reminding her that she's a witch for her to act upon what she already knows. However, it's completely different in the movie.
I remember reading something in herbology. Devil snare. It's deadly fun. But will sulk in the sun, that's it. Devil snare hates sunlight. Luma Solem.
As always, there's no panic and she doesn't need any help. We see this over and over again in the series. Whether she's taking heroic lines that are supposed to be said by Ron,
If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too.
or how she fearlessly leads and protects the trio out of any tough situation, or how the only time we get to see an off-putting aspect of her personality is in the first movie. I love Hermione, but movie Hermione is too perfect, and the more perfect a character is, the less relatable they become, because perfect people don't exist. So herein lies the problem I have with adaptational attractiveness. I really don't mind if it's purely just about making a character handsome or pretty, but if this glossing up of a character extends to every imperfection they have, just so that we end up with a flawless character that is very easy to love, then that bothers me. There's another character whom over the past 7 or so years has kind of given me Hermione Granger flashbacks, as I think his case of adaptational attractiveness tells a very similar story to that of hers, and that's Tyrion Lannister. Let's start slowly from an appearance point of view. Tyrion is described as a dwarf with stubby legs, a brutish face, a jutting forehead, mismatched eyes of green and black, and a mixture of pale blonde and black hair. He also loses most of his nose in the Battle of Blackwater. In the show though, Tyrion is played by Peter Dinklage, who is rather handsome, and the only effort made in changing his appearance is by giving him a scar. Now, like with Emma Watson, I feel the need to state that Peter Dinklage is killing it as Tyrion, and is easily my favorite casting choice of the series. The reason I see a similarity in the portrayal of these two characters is this. Yes, like Hermione, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many instances in the 7 seasons where Peter Dinklage being handsome has significantly altered the story. So on a surface level, it isn't really a problem. However, with this considered, I think that the showrunner's inability to showcase what is supposed to be a harsh appearance is a small indicator that paints a bigger picture of how they want audiences to view this character as a whole. Anyone that's read the series knows that it's not just his harsh appearance that gets whitewashed, it's also several other aspects to his character and things he does that gets the same treatment. His complexity and moral ambiguity is brushed aside so that we can get a snarky hero that is impossible to hate. Take his relationship with Shay. In the books, it is very apparent that she doesn't love him at all and that Tyrion was so desperate to be loved that he wouldn't let himself see the reality of what the relationship was. It was clear that he should have known better. Whereas in the show, it's more of a tragic love story rather than the pathetic one-sided love affair we see in the book. In the show, she betrays him because she's a woman scorned, not because she's a woman that's helpless against the likes of Tywin and Cersei, and has to do whatever she can to get by. When he kills her in the book, even if you think he was justified in doing so after her quote-unquote betrayal, he's still killing a defenseless woman who he should have known better than to trust or seek love from. So what if she struck a deal with Cersei after it was offered to her? Is she supposed to say no? Saying no to Cersei Lannister isn't an option if you want to stay alive. Tyrion is incredibly smart, he should have realized this. He realizes it with Bronn, that Bronn is loyal to whoever is paying him and will abandon him for better prospects. But he won't let himself see the same in Shay because of his delusions of love being a possibility in the relationship. In the show, however, she's not a defenseless woman. She goes for a knife, which ends up making the killing an act of self-defense instead of straight up murder. He even apologizes to her body afterwards. They do their best to take away all moral ambiguity from the character and want to protect him as much as they can from any audience backlash. Same with him and Sansa. In the book, he gropes her on their wedding night and he goes further before stopping. In the show, he shuts it down immediately. Because he's a hero, and God forbid we let the drunken, sex-crazed aspect of his personality go any further than just entertainment and comic relief. There's a ton of moments like this where they go to great lengths to whitewash him and make him as sympathetic and endearing as they possibly can. They want him to be insanely likable. They want him to be a fan favorite that's easy to love, which, like Hermione, has resulted in an adaptational attractiveness that extends beyond appearance. That is why, even though by the definition I gave you at the start of the video, one that says adaptational attractiveness is about altering a character's appearance, I think that too often, the beautification of a character is but a symptom of a larger issue with how whoever is doing the adapting is trying to alter a character as a whole. If they only stuck to appearance, then maybe this could be accepted as something that comes with the territory of adapting text to screen. But in instances where this change seeps into the character's personality or actions, if the removal of physical flaws is matched with the removal of character flaws as well, then I think the adapters are doing a disservice to the story and are deserving of being called out.